Hey everyone, and welcome to 121 in Flux. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Connor.
Yeah, first one of the year.
Yes. We're going to talk about movies. We talk about a movie on this show. We're going to talk about Jojo Rabbit, which has just recently came out in the UK. So we both had a chance to go and see it and give our thoughts on it. This wasn't even a planned review. We just both realised we were seeing it around the same time and thought, oh, we may as well talk about it. So this is the Taika Waititi film, starring himself as an imaginary version of Adolf Hitler. The main character is a young boy named Jojo. It is 1945. Well, maybe it starts in 44, but it's definitely 45 by the time it ends. And he is, a member of the Hitler Youth, and he's a devout little brainwashed Nazi. That is basically who he is. And his mother's played by Scarlett Johansson. And I don't want to get into the plot. We'll start spoiler free, of course. We'll give you a warning before we get into plot heavy details. I think we can even avoid what the main, because I didn't know even what the main driving part of the plot was once it got going.
Oh, really? That was in the trailer, to be fair.
I never saw a trailer, so.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't even know what I knew little boy, imaginary Hitler, and that was it. Like that's all I really knew about this. And there you go. So Sam Rockwell's in there as well. He's like the general who's in charge of the Hitler Youth because he's got a bad eye. So
there's a handful of others that show up, like Rebel Wilson's there with him.
Yeah. So Steve Merchant, of course, is a member of the Gestapo at one point.
Naturally.
Very delightful. So that's the gist of it. Here's my thing with Taika Waititi is that I've generally appreciated everything he's made so far, but none of them have been complete home runs for me, right? I mean, I probably like What We Do in the Shadows the most, right? But I don't seem to love it as much as everyone else, and I think the TV show's better, right?
So I haven't seen the TV show yet, so I cannot judge, but I do, from memory, like it more than you do, but I haven't seen it in a while.
Hunt for the Wilder People I thought was solid, but because of all the hype it was getting, I felt kind of let down. I was like, oh, it was good, but I didn't feel the praise.
I watched that without kind of knowing what it was. I just saw, oh hey, this is the guy that did What We Do in the Shadows. Maybe I'll check it out, and I was like, oh, this is kind of fantastic.
And Thor Ragnarok, I thought was really funny, and I enjoyed it for the comedy, but the actual sort of Marvel-y plot towards the end wasn't as exciting. And that's what that is. I am happy to say this is easily my favourite Taika Waititi film. I think this one nails exactly what it's trying to do and does it in a quirky way. It has a really heartfelt story at its core, a good message at its core, and somehow does it. Somehow gives us a little Nazi and makes him the most sympathetic little shit there is. Because the heart of the story ultimately is that he's someone who's been brainwashed by the propaganda. He's brainwashed because of the country he's in at the time, and the story's about him overcoming that and realizing that he shouldn't believe in these things, and that's probably obviously what the story's going to be. Like, what else could it be? Like, we're not going to go watch
Otherwise
this.
We're in for a really dark movie.
Yeah. So because of that, every time he says something really bad about, say, Jewish people, it does have this bite of humor to it because it's his 10-year-old boy interpretation, or 12-year-old boy, whatever he is, of what what he's been told. So all those racist cartoons that get passed on, and all those propaganda adverts and things that I remember from history class.
He believes them just because he doesn't know any better.
Yeah. So he, there's a question at one point in this movie where he asks, where do Jews lay their eggs? And it's just such a line that comes out of nowhere, and it almost reminded me of Borat. The way that Borat would say these crazy things about Jewish people. And again, also satire. This is also satire. But what's beautiful about this is satire from the mind of someone who is too young to realize what he's being misled yet, right? So there's an innocence to it. There's an innocence where Borat is satire, but it's arguably mean-spirited satire because it's
satire out of ignorance.
Yeah. Whereas this is, it's a child who is innocent and we're hoping at least has the heart to actually pull through and kind of see the right and grow and so on. So
it's weird. Taika Waititi has a way that usually I really don't care about kids in a lot of film or TV, but between this and Hunt for the Wilder People, I'm like, yeah, for whatever reason he can just write it so well.
I actually, Jojo's got a friend in this movie who we see every so often, and there's something really simple actually at one point where Jojo says he's basically got a girlfriend now, and his friend, the way he just like, because he says, "Oh, look at you, got a girlfriend." That's all he says, but it's the way he delivers the line. It feels like a middle-aged woman congratulating like a teenage boy who's just got his first girl. He's like, "Oh, you got a girlfriend now, just for how nice!" Like it just the delivery of it was just so weird for a kid that it was perfect.
I think, to be fair, that is consistent throughout the movie, not just like
Sure.
that, like,
Oh, sure,
all
yeah,
the
yeah.
time. Like his entire actual plot, if you can really call it that, is like, hey, look how much older he seems than what he
Yeah.
actually is.
Yeah, that's kind of his running gag. So there's a crowd pleasing moment. At least I thought it was a crowd pleasing moment in the last act, which I think is one of the best moments of 2019 in terms of movies.
I suspect I know what it might be.
You probably do, but
do you know, and that's one of the greatest strengths of this movie is that it is a horrific time in history, and there are moments in this movie that are genuinely horrifying scenes of what's going on around it, and it will be in the middle of this utterly devastating moment in a war, and I will be laughing hysterically because of something else that's happening just in the middle of this chaos.
do you know what it kind of feels like a nice little counterbalance to is I think this would make for an interesting double feature with La Vita Bella, which is Roberto Bonini, who starred and directed in that. Funnily enough, much like Taika Waititi, starred and directed, although he was the main character in this, and he was a Jewish man, and it's a movie about him falling in love with his wife, having a kid, and then having his family go to a concentration camp. So it's, it goes to really dark places, but the whole point of the movie is kind of like never give up, your love of life, and what makes us us, and so on and so on. It's just this feel, not want to say feel good, but there's this like spirit of the human nature kind of prevailing despite how awful everything is. So I'd say that one is more depressing because there is kind of this underlying thing of like, oh, this is going to end badly, and I really like these people and they're really good. But I do think there's kind of a balance with this one in the sense that they go well together, and they're both kind of about seeing the beauty in the middle of the darkness and the beauty in the middle of Nazi Germany, basically. So
yeah.
So I think in that sense it's just really well done. And I'll just say, if you're PG-13 and you've got your one F-bomb, this is what you save your one F-bomb for.
It's so good.
It's one of the best F-bombs in cinema history. Top 10. Yeah. I'm saying it.
No, I'm with you. This is Watiti's best movie so far, and I say that as someone who's a bigger fan of the other movies than you are as well. But this is just, it's a masterclass in this sort of movie.
Yeah, he's able to balance this in a way that I wouldn't trust most people to balance a topic like this.
And this is something that ever since we heard about this film, probably like good a year and a half ago now, maybe longer, and we heard he's playing this imaginary version of Hitler. And and we go, okay, so he's bringing his comedy to this because, of course, he's just on that alone. But we're still in Nazi Germany, and it's not an outright comedy. It's doing other things. You're like, can this be pulled off? And I think he's one of the few people who can pull it off.
I think, yeah, it's the sort of thing, because it's based on a book, and this is one of these things where I'd say the book's maybe unfilmable for the most part, unless you get the exact right person. And it's because of the way it dangles its humour with the character and the subject matter. But I think what's genius about just the story idea in general is that if it's an examination of how propaganda and the state and how they're trying to influence their the people with their like horrid beliefs, like using a child to examine that is actually genius because they're the most impressionable, and it kind of makes some adults look like idiots for buying into certain things,
And it's smart because we never hate the kid for having these beliefs because we understand that he's just a kid. He doesn't know any better. Yeah. Whereas the adults, we look at them and go, you're willingly ignoring facts for the most part.
Yeah, because whenever he does talk about Jewish people, he talks about them as if they're monsters. Like he actually describes fantasy creatures almost, and this is the absurd level that he's been led to believe what a Jewish person is.
Very early on at the boot camp kind of, it is basically like, hey, summer camp for the weekend sort of thing that the Hitler Youth are on. And they're like, right, okay, so let's describe the Jew. And it's scales of forked tongue.
I'm thinking. So as you said the boot camp thing, I'm just thinking of because Sam Rockwell's the leader of this thing. He's giving this speech, and I don't want to spoil the jokes here. I just wanted Connor will get this. Rebel Wilson's like response after they say what the women are there to do, what the girls are there to learn, really cracked me up. So
yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah, cast are obviously great. It is, stacked with. It helps you have someone like Stephen Merchant who's there for just essentially one scene, but he's so good in that one scene. You have Sam Rockwell, who's a very Sam Rockwell character.
That is one way of putting it. Yeah, and he's with I want to say Alfie Allen is his name. Next to him, Theon from Game of Thrones. Pretty sure his name's Alfie.
Oh right, yeah, he's like his henchman dude that's always there. Yeah. So yeah, you got a really good cast, and we have to give props to the main kid who plays Jojo. I'm just going to get his name here because I don't want to, not give him the shout out. Roman Griffin Davis. He is phenomenal in this movie. He carries this movie, and it's one of those things where sometimes you'll watch a movie and you'll be impressed at how, despite all the big A-listers, or I mean, that's everyone here's an A-lister, but they're all solid, dependable people that we all like, the moviegoers like. But you have this new kid in the middle who is just holding his own and brings the heart. I mean, if he wasn't likable, if he didn't nail the tone of what he was directed to do, this movie would not work.
Oh, absolutely. And often they do stand out so much that you go, oh no, well, let's nominate them for all the awards. It's like, I'm thinking like Haley Steinfeld in True Grit, where up against all these huge names, and it's like, oh, she's actually really good. And it is the same here, where you've got like I say, Sam Rockwell and Scarlett Johansson, acting against this kid, and he's more than holding his own. Every single moment of the movie.
Yeah, no, he's really good. Now, the one thing I will say, it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter in this type of movie, this tone of movie. But they play very fast and loose with who has a German accent and who does not. As much as I like his friend character, he doesn't even try to hide an English accent the entire time.
It's kind of amusing.
Yeah. Whereas the main kid is mostly doing a German accent. I mean, it slips here or there. I will say, Taika Waititi, because I'm so used to his New Zealand accent, I could hear it coming through. Like, he's trying to do German, but you could hear that New Zealand twang coming through.
It's sort of thing where you kind of just let it slide because it's like, it's an imaginary version. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. Like, I mean, they're all speaking English anyway. I mean, at least the text is all in German. Like, they make a point of like all the posters and stuff.
I actually really appreciated that.
Yeah. So
it's a nice touch. Yeah. And then and whenever you got the general gist of whatever they were meant to be, just from context of the images that were on the poster with it. And if not, they would read a line of it or whatever that was important, so you'd get it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really good cast. So it's really well directed. So I think with that said, I think I want to give the spoiler warning so we can dive in and talk about what the plot is and all of our favorite jokes and moments. So full spoilers, although I will take this time before we start the spoiler section to thank our Patreon producers for the month. So thank you to David Short, Alison M. Fordyce, Cindy Palacios, and Tyler Hess. They are Patreon producers, which means they are patrons at $20 or up. Of course, you can support us at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, but you don't have to give $20 or up. You can give just $1 per month, and for that $1, you get bonus episodes of some of our movie podcasts, Screams After Midnight and the Atomic Cinema Experiment. That's our horror and sci-fi movie podcast. And you get bonus outtakes and things like that. And then you get a $5 tier, you get voting rights and so on and so on. So there's a bunch of stuff over there. If you want to help keep all the content coming, go and have a look at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. So, full spoilers then for Jojo Rabbit. So, of course, the main sort of actual heart of the movie is that Scarlett Johansson, the mother character, is hiding a girl in the house, sort of secret closet area, where this Jewish sort of teenage girl who was a friend of her daughter's, because we find out that Jojo did have a bigger sister who passed away, and she's kind of hiding in her old room, and Jojo finds her. And there's a lot of humor here, of course. I did like
it's played like a proper horror movie. It does the thing where the fingers come round the edge of the corner.
Yeah, I love that in particular. The fingers coming around the corner of the door, because it's almost like either this is just his viewpoint and she's not really doing that, or she's messing with him and doing the slow.
I'm gonna go messing with him, because when she does it coming onto the stairs and she kind of walks some of her fingers down the banister first, she's messing with him big time.
Yeah. But my favorite part though is when he comes back to speak to her for the first time. He's got like a pot on his head, and he's got like a pan and his knife, and he's like, "Hey, Jew girl," like he says the phrasing killed me. But so the arc of the movie is that he finds this Jewish girl, and over the course of the film, like he thinks at first he's scared, he hates her. He maybe asks some questions to people. He's almost going to get his mother caught that she's hiding someone in the house. But ultimately, of course, he grows to care about her. And I actually, at the scene where he first kind of shows a sign of caring is kind of wonderful. Because, Elsa, this character, she tells a story of she's got a fiancé who's off fighting in the war or whatever.
He's in Paris, I think.
Yeah. Not fighting for Nazi Germany, might I add.
No, resistance.
Resistance, yeah. And she's engaged and she's waiting for him to get back, yada yada yada. And Jojo fakes a little letter saying that, hey, this is Nathan. Basically I'm going to dump you because I found someone else and I don't like you very much. I can't remember the exact wording, but it was really this mean-spirited breakup letter.
And he puts in part of a poem from this poet that he really liked and that she loved as well because of it.
Yeah, and she starts crying behind the wall, so you can hear her, and he feels bad, so he comes back and fakes a second letter saying, "Hey, disregard that last letter. I do actually want to marry you." it's this first sign of like, oh, okay, he actually gives a shit. Like,
he felt bad.
Yeah. It's this slow, obviously, realization for him that, hey, she's not a scary monster. She's just a person, and that's all she is. And this leads to wonderful scenes. I think now's the point where I want to just bring up some of my favorite jokes. So I do want to say, no stabbing is definitely one of them. That's at the boot camp early on. As I mentioned earlier, Sam Rockwell listing, okay, all the boys are here to learn this and war maneuvers and ammunitions and this and tactics and blah blah blah. And girls, you're here to cook and make beds and learn how to get pregnant. Crickets. And then eventually Rebel Wilson shouts out, I've had 4 children for Nazi Germany.
It was like 18 or something stupid.
Was it? Okay, but
yeah.
She says so. It's a great time to be a woman in the country. Just really funny satire, doing its thing. Joe joke didn't start off funny, but was hilarious by the time it got to like the third person.
Is it the hail?
Yeah, the Heils where the Gestapo stop in. So Steve Merchant's up like 4 or 5 like assistants. So there's like 5 of them, and so when they come in, they all say Heil Hitler to Jojo, and Jojo has to say it back to each one of them in turn. So we get 5 sets of Heil Hitlers
back and forth.
Yeah, and then in walks Sam Rockwell and his assistant. Sam Rockwell has to say it to each one back and forth in turn, including Jojo, and then his assistant does it with everyone back and forth. And then eventually, when Elsa appears and pretends to be his big sister to try and like sort of alleviate suspicion, she has to do it to everyone, back and forth. And by the time it got to like the third person, and it was just like 2 minutes solid of Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler.
And I think it's funny because of the bit at the start where he's psyching himself up with his imaginary friend Hitler doing that as well in the mirror, and he's just running out into the street doing it. And and that's just on his own, and it's like, okay, that sets the tone for the movie because that's like the opening.
Yeah. And obviously, it's pointing out the ridiculous charade of having this, like, everyone has to say this to each other, kind of thing. Yeah. It's pointing that out. But it's also great because the payoff for it later, when he starts rejecting imaginary Hitler, because imaginary Hitler's trying to tell him, oh, no, you have to turn on that filthy Jew, blah, 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 blah. Like, he basically says, no. And he's like, oh, come on, give me a Heil Hitler. He's like, no. Even just a little Heil? Just a little Heil? Really funny stuff. Really delightful. And like we say, there's a lot of heart in there. There's a lot of scenes, again, with Elsa and Jojo, where he's kind of growing with her and starts to stick up for her, starts to realise that maybe he's in love with her, and she kind of realises he's got a crush on her, but makes it very clear that, no, you're more like a little brother. You're like 10, and I'm like 17.
She's
so
like 17 or something like that, yeah.
And this is the thing, by the end of the movie, they're going to be together because probably the saddest thing that happens in the movie, and I think it's actually revealed wonderfully, is the death of his mum, of Scarlett Johansson.
I knew they were going to do it, and it still hits. Yeah,
because, well, did you know it was the scene that they were in that he was going to stumble into it? Because I felt like the scene itself had no warning that was the scene.
No, I didn't know it when it was going to be, but I knew it was coming because, like, before that, they'd focused quite heavily on her shoes.
Yeah.
And we'd seen the hanging people in the street. So I was like, oh, okay, I know where this is going.
Yeah, because I think the obvious thing to suspect is that you can see this in your head how it would normally be done, where he'll see the hanging victims and then the camera will, like, go down to the shoes or something like that. It doesn't do it like that. Like he's doing other things. He's like, putting posters up for the Hitler Youth or whatever, and then he turns around and just sees the shoes hanging there. It's so sudden,
devastating.
Yeah. I actually heard there was an old woman in the row in front of me who gasped, like audibly gasped.
I get it.
It was so well done, and and they spend a lot of time saying that, okay, so she's very anti-Nazi, she's hiding obviously this Jewish girl, but even her husband was part of the resistance, and in fact one of my favorite lines is basically before before Jojo starts turning over a new leaf with Elsa, and she says to him, "You're not really a Nazi, you're just a 10-year-old boy who doesn't know any better."
This was in the trailer.
Yeah, and he's like, "Well, I like swastikas, so like."
Yeah, like pretty big fan, so I think I'm good.
Do you know what's so funny? Isn't it like that line of dialogue is delivered like a gaming snob who is like, well, I've got liquid cooling, so. Clearly, clearly, I am a hardcore gamer.
You could hear PC Master Race at the end of that.
Oh, it's so good, and a lot of that comes in where she talks to Elsa, because the mom doesn't know that Elsa and Jojo have discovered each other, right? Everyone's sort of in the dark between each of the pairings that are happening, and she talks to Elsa about how she loves a little boy, and she knows that deep down in there there's the nice little boy who's not like a.
But she's scared that he's just a brainwashed little Nazi.
Yeah. So it's really happy that by the end of the movie, like he isn't, and he gets to, and
I think it's really effective as well that he's come around before she dies. It's not just a reaction to her death that pushed him over the edge, because the scene where he's covering for her with Stephen Merchant and the others is before he finds out that she's dead.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it's implied that the reason why they're searching the house is because they suspect her, and that's why.
It is, because they're like, oh, where is she? She's just like, oh, I don't know, around town. She goes, oh, yeah, unusual, that, isn't it?
Not really, but sure.
Yeah,
that's what people do. But I really liked all that stuff. The stuff with Sam Rockwell's very interesting as well, where because he's there with the Gestapo, and like they're like, okay, we have to see your papers, young lady, and she gets she searches the desk, just hoping that they're in there, and it's an old photo because it was when his sister was maybe his age or whatever.
I think it was like she was 14. It was 3 years old.
Okay, sure. And it's actually Sam Rockwell who grabs it and looks at it, and he's like, okay, this is an old photo, when's your date of birth? And she answers the questions and seemingly gets them right. But afterwards, we find out that no, the date of birth was wrong. She looks at the papers and it's like, wait, is he like covering for them, or does he, or is this like they're going to be back? He's just, planning something worse.
It's great that I think you kind of get, even in the scene before you learn that he is covering, you kind of get that idea that he's going along with this, whatever it is. Like, he probably knows that the daughter was dead because the mother knew him reasonably well.
And it's actually one of the most heartbreaking sort of heroic moments in the whole movie is at the end when the Allied forces are storming the city and they're taking over and they've won, and not to mention the fact that we literally have like Rebel Wilson putting grenades on kids' backs saying, "Oh God, run to the enemy." That was
horrifically dark at points.
Yeah. Which, by the way, the other time I laughed early on was when there's a great big thing where after he's been embarrassed, Jojo gets a pep talk from fake Hitler to seize the day basically, and he runs.
He's a rabbit.
He runs in slow motion, and Sam Rockwell's giving like a grenade like sort of lesson. He's like, "We're going to teach you how to throw a grenade and not blow yourself up." And Jojo, who wasn't acting the lesson, runs in slow motion, grabs the grenade out of his hand, throws it, but it bounces off a tree and lands right in front of him, and he just goes, "Shit."
I like that imaginary Hitler runs away beforehand.
Yeah. It was the delivery of shit was really good. But no, Sam Rockwell does this thing where, so he obviously was fighting on the Nazi side, so he's been rounded up by the forces, and because Jojo was kind of running around and he had like a shirt on.
It's one of the guys who who bullies him early in the film, who's like who gives him the rabbit nickname, who sees him and is like, all right, Jojo, come on, you'll come with us. We're all going down together.
Yeah, and Sam Rockwell basically rips his shirt off and starts yelling filthy Jew at him to make it very clear that he's not with the army. He's basically just being horrible to him for the visual of the Allied forces so that they'll let him go, thinking that he's innocent. I mean, he is innocent, to be fair, but he's like him doing this and making himself look worse because we hear him getting shot like minutes later. So it's this little heroic act that really I thought it played well. I thought at the moment
it does, and I say because Sarah is a really interesting character because he comes across as an absolute dick for a long time. There's clearly all this homoerotic tension between him and his henchmen. There's a lot of like looks back and forth, and the extremely flamboyant outfit that he designs for himself, and we see all the drawings early on.
Yeah, I love the fact that we see all these drawings. He's got this ridiculous cape, and
it's like the boots are just decorative.
And then you see
it's not all.
And when you see him in the final battles at the end, he's actually got this cape on, and it's like this is wonderful. Like,
and this is what I'm talking about. Where this is a scene where you're kind of horrified. You're watching kids running around blowing themselves up trying to take out the Allied forces. It's this war torn houses being bombed and everything. It looks terrible, and then he comes charging in that outfit, and you've got his henchman on the like French horn or whatever it was behind him, kind of giving him the big entrance, and I'm just absolutely cracked up laughing.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And then after this, he goes home to see Elsa, and fake Hitler doesn't want him to, help her. He's like, no, you have to do something about this. Because it's worth mentioning at this point, he knows Hitler's dead, because he found that out from his friend just like a few scenes before this. So he's like, you can't be here. And this is where we get the great, Hitler's yelling at him, trying to get him to do this, and he just yells out, F off Hitler, and kicks him Sparta style, and Hitler goes flying through the window. It is absolutely because there's no reason why it couldn't have had its one F-bomb, but I just wasn't expecting the kid to yell out F off Hitler.
There was maybe 10 or 12 people in my screening watching this today, and there was at least 3 people cheered when this happened. And that's pretty uncommon in an audience here to have any sort of reaction beyond the odd chuckles and laughs, and maybe a gasp, like you say, or a jump if there's a scare. But
no, I felt the smile in my face as I was laughing when he said that. It was a very uplifting moment of him just saying, "No, F off Hitler." And
so pathetic.
And the kids are left on their own, and presumably Elsa's going to take care of him like a little brother, because that's where we end. I mean, the final scene of the movie is like, well, what do we do now? And now that all this is over, and she just kind of starts bobbing her head, and then he starts bobbing his head, and they start dancing, and David Bowie's Hero starts playing, although once the sign kicks in when the credits hit, it's in German.
I knew this was coming, because this was the music they used for the trailer.
Okay.
But yeah, again, dancing was a big part of the relationship with his mother. Her whole thing was, no, you dance because you're free and because you can.
And he has a whole thing where he can't tie his shoelaces for the whole movie, but at the end, he's able to tie her shoelaces for her. So
I think it's really important again because when his mother's body is hanging there, he tries tying her shoelace and he can't do it.
Yeah.
So this kind of really lands in that regard.
It's wonderfully paced. It's exactly the right length. There was not, I've seen so many movies in the past year that were 2.5 hours to 3 hours long in the theater. It was so nice to get a nice hour 45.
Lean, about an hour 50 or whatever, and it was like, oh no, this was great.
Lean, well paced movie. Did everything it needed to do. Nothing felt like it was missing. Performances were just through the roof, like throughout. Visuals like Hitler like lying in his bed, keeping his bed warm for him, and
just everything he did as Hitler.
Yeah.
Every time, whenever they were running and he was just doing the dancing in the background.
Even the way he entered scenes, like when he enters behind the tree at the start, he's just like, he just kind of pops out.
Or leaving scenes, he sometimes just dives out of the window.
Yeah. It's all really entertaining stuff. I don't really have much of a negative word to say. I went in hopeful. I like the idea of the movie, and Taika Waititi is someone who I always appreciate his work, even if I've not loved everything as much as I wanted.
You're guaranteed to at least like it, right?
Yeah. But I'm happy to say that he's finally kind of knocked it out of the park for me. Because up until now, he hadn't. Like I felt like up until now, he'd been kind of like skimming greatness for me. He was almost getting there repeatedly. it never quite really hit it for me. And I think this was his crown jewel. So we'll see how Thor: Love and Thunder goes with Beta Ray Bill. But
is that what we're going with for now?
Well, I mean, Christian Bale's in talks, and I like the pun of Beta Ray Bill. So
yeah.
I hope he's playing Beta Ray Bill just for that joke. But no, this is wonderful. And I'm so happy to see something in the theater that is not a reboot or a sequel or a comic book movie.
Right. In that regard, I had a fantastic day at the cinema today because I did this and then went straight into Knives Out.
Mm-hmm.
And personal preference aside, I don't think this is better. I really like Knives Out, but I think this is better. But again, just the idea of they're both very original, unique. Okay, director had a thing to do, and they're not franchises or reboots, like you say. They're just, hey, let's do this idea. And in that regard, I had a great day.
Yeah. So there you go. Jojo Rabbit is very, very good. So with that, we will get to rating the movie. So what are you giving it?
It's high. It's really high. I might go with a 9.5.
I'm not going with a 0.5. I was going with a straight 9. But do not let that sound like a negative score after his 9.5.
I mean, like I say, it's not quite at the 10 level. Like it's not quite getting there. Even though there is nothing negative to say, it just doesn't quite get to that. But I can't think of anything. I haven't got any reason why it's not a 10. So it's like, okay, other than just feeling. So that's why I'm going with the 9.5.
Okay, all right, 9 and 9.5. It's hard to get much better recommendations than that these days, to be honest. No. So if you have not seen Jojo Rabbit, make sure you do, because it's very, very, very good. And you can kind of count this as part of 2019 catch-up, I suppose. I don't know how much 2019 catch-up we're doing. This was kind of just an incidental thing, but we'll see what comes. So yes, let us know what you think of Jojo Rabbit in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mail_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show, rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts, give us 5 stars. More people will find us that way. You can, of course, support us financially at patreon.com/mailfuzztv, as I mentioned earlier. And you can check out other stuff we do. I mentioned the sci-fi movie podcast, The Atomic Cinema Experiment, the horror movie podcast, Streams After Midnight. And it is worth mentioning that very soon our top 50 movies of the decade will be coming out, which is a multi-part series with everyone from Mail Fuzz TV giving their picks in turn. So that'll be a huge series when it hits.
Yeah.
So but that's us. So thank you once again for watching and listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching keep watching movies, guys, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.